Nightmares don't just happen when we're asleep. Sometimes, the worst ones find us when we're wide awake. And the strange thing is, they never start like nightmares. They start with something ordinary. A late-night drive home, moving into a new apartment, a weekend camping trip with friends, a babysitting job that feels like easy money, normal moments, everyday life, until suddenly, something changes, until something feels wrong. That's where real horror lives. Not always in ghosts or monsters, but in the people we trust, the places we feel safe, and the routines we never question. Tonight, I want you to listen closely, because the 4 stories I'm about to tell you, they're all true. They sound like nightmares, but they happen to real people. First, a driver out on a lonely highway at 1 in the morning notices headlights following them. At first, it seems harmless, but every turn they take, the car behind them follows. It becomes a game of cat and mouse they never signed up for. Then, there's the story of a college student who moves into a cheap little apartment. At first, the only problem seems to be the scratching sounds in the walls. But the truth of what was actually living there with them is far worse than pests. Next, a group of friends pitch a tent in the woods. It's supposed to be laughter, marshmallows, a night under the stars. Until the whistling begins. Until the voices start calling their names from the dark trees. And finally, a babysitter puts 2 kids to bed in a quiet suburban home. The phone rings. A strange voice whispers. Footsteps echo upstairs, even though the children are sleeping right beside her. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe before we begin. Not just to support the channel, but because every week, I share stories that stick with you. Stories that remind us the scariest things aren't always legends or campfire tales. They could happen to anyone. They could happen to you. So turn off the lights, put your phone down, and let yourself sink into the silence around you. Because the people in these stories, they thought they were safe too. They thought they were just going through another ordinary night. Until it turned into a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. These are 4 nightmarish true scary stories. And tonight, you won't be sleeping easy. It was just after 1 in the morning. A young driver was heading home from a late shift, their car the only one on a long stretch of highway. The world felt empty. Streetlights stood far apart, the glow of their beams swallowed by the dark. For a while it was peaceful, just the steady rhythm of tires on pavement and the quiet hum of the engine. But then, a pair of headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. At first, they didn't think much of it. Another driver on the road this late, rare, but not impossible. The car kept a steady distance, just far enough back that the driver couldn't make out who was inside. A few minutes passed, and something about it felt off. Every time they changed lanes, the headlights followed. When they slowed a little, the car slowed too. When they sped up, the headlights grew brighter, matching their pace. The driver tried to shake it off. It's nothing, just coincidence. Don't overthink it. But deep down, a knot of unease started to twist in their stomach. Sound. Faint rumble of tires, distant wind. Another 10 minutes crawled by. Still there. The same car. The same 2 bright eyes in the mirror. The driver decided to test it. At the last second, they flicked their blinker and took an exit ramp off the highway. Their heart thudded as they checked the mirror. And sure enough, the car followed. Now the knot in their stomach turned to ice. The road off the highway was darker, narrower. No other cars. Just the 2 of them. The driver's hands gripped the wheel tighter, sweat starting to gather on their palms. The car behind them suddenly surged forward, flashing its high beams once, twice, before falling back again. Then it swerved a little left, a little right, as if trying to make them nervous. It worked. The young driver thought about pulling over, letting them pass. But something in their gut screamed, "Don't stop. Don't ever stop." The road stretched on. Empty houses, closed businesses, dark fields. Nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. The headlights behind them darted closer again, this time tailgating so close that every bump of the road shook the mirror. The driver's chest tightened. Their breath grew shallow. They spotted a gas station up ahead, one of those 24-hour places with a flickering sign and a couple of pumps under buzzing lights. It wasn't much, but it was something. With a shaky hand, they flipped on their blinker and turned in. The other car didn't hesitate. It followed. The driver pulled up near the pumps, close to the station doors, hoping someone might be inside working. They put the car in park but didn't get out. Instead, they watched. The other vehicle rolled in slowly, circling the lot once, then twice. The driver couldn't see the person inside, but they could feel it. Whoever it was, they weren't here for gas. They were waiting. Sound. Faint buzzing of a gas station light. Minutes dragged on. The stranger's car idled in the corner of the lot, headlights trained on them like a predator studying prey. The young driver's hands trembled as they reached for their phone. They dialed 911, voice shaking as they explained what was happening. Within minutes, though it felt like an eternity, a police cruiser pulled into the station. Red and blue lights painted the concrete. And just like that, the other car sped out of the lot and vanished into the night. The officer listened carefully as the shaken driver explained everything. They escorted them inside, checked the security cameras, and what they saw made their skin crawl. The footage showed the stranger's car pulling into the lot long before the driver arrived. Sitting there, waiting. The moment the young driver pulled in, the stranger circled, watching. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. That person had been waiting for someone to follow. The officer told them they'd made the right choice by stopping at a public place instead of pulling onto some dark back road. If they had, well, they might not have been telling their story to anyone at all. The young driver never saw that stranger again. But even years later, every time headlights filled their rearview mirror on an empty road, their stomach dropped. Because once you've been hunted, you never forget the feeling. When you're young, broke, and just trying to get through school, you don't get to be picky about where you live. That's exactly where the student was when they found a studio apartment for way cheaper than anything else in the city. It wasn't much. Peeling paint, a few stains on the carpet, thin walls where you could hear every cough and footstep from your neighbors. But it was cheap, and it was theirs. For the first week, everything seemed fine. They were so busy with classes and late night studying that they barely noticed the apartment at all. But then, late one night, lying in bed with the lights off, they heard something. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Came from the wall, faint at first. They froze, listening. Then it came again. Scratch, scratch. They sat up, staring at the wall near the corner. Rats, they thought. Great, just what I need. They tried to shrug it off, pulled the blanket tighter, and forced themselves to sleep. But over the next few nights, the scratching continued. Always late. Always when the building was quiet. Sound. Soft scratching in the background. After a while, they noticed other things. A loaf of bread on the counter, half gone when they swore they hadn't touched it. A carton of milk, lower than it should have been. At first, they blamed themselves. Maybe they ate more than they remembered. Maybe stress was making them forget. But then came the closet. One morning, rushing to class, they opened it to grab a jacket. Their clothes weren't where they'd left them. Some hangers were shifted, shoved to the side. A shoe was missing from the pair. It didn't make sense. No one had a key. No one could have gotten in. They brushed it off, told themselves they were being paranoid. Everyone loses things. Everyone forgets. Still, that scratching in the walls. Every night. Sometimes louder, sometimes faint. Always there. Sound. Low, uneasy tone fades in. Then, one night, they woke up to something worse. It was 3 a.m. The room was still. But as their eyes adjusted in the dark, they noticed movement. Not in the room, but inside the wall vent. A shadow. Something shifting behind the metal slats. Their heart stopped. For a moment, they thought it was just their imagination. That they were dreaming. But then the shadow moved again, slow, deliberate. Like someone adjusting their weight. They grabbed their phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the vent. The light caught something. A flash of pale skin. Then it vanished. They screamed. Within minutes, they were on the phone with building maintenance, voice shaking as they explained what they'd just seen. The next morning, 2 workers showed up. They unscrewed the vent cover and shined a flashlight inside. First, nothing. Just darkness. But then one of them muttered, "What the hell is this?" Behind the vent wasn't just empty space. There was a crawl space, narrow but big enough for someone to squeeze through. The workers crawled in, their beams cutting through the dark. And that's when they found it. A thin, dirty mattress, piles of food wrappers, empty water bottles, even some of the students' missing clothes, crumpled in a heap. Someone had been living in there. For weeks, maybe longer. The realization hit like ice. All those nights hearing scratching. All the missing food. The shifted closet. This wasn't rats. This wasn't stress. Someone had been crawling out of the walls when the students slept. Watching. Eating their food. Slipping back into the darkness before morning. The police were called immediately. They combed through the crawl space, but by then, it was empty. Whoever had been living there was gone. To this day, no one knows who it was. A squatter? A neighbor? A stranger who found a way in through the building's old ventilation system? The student didn't wait to find out. They packed their things and left the apartment that same day, refusing to ever step foot inside again. There's something about camping that makes people feel safe. Maybe it's the laughter, the firelight, the thought that if you're with friends, nothing bad can happen. That's what this group of 5 friends thought when they set up camp deep in the forest one summer night. The day had been perfect. They hiked, they swam in the lake nearby, they cooked hot dogs over the fire. As the night grew darker, the forest around them felt endless. The kind of dark you don't get in the city. A darkness so thick, the fire only lit a small circle around their tents. Beyond that circle, it was just shadows. First, it was peaceful. Crickets, the crackle of the flames, the occasional owl in the distance. But then, somewhere around midnight, one of them paused. "Shoo! Do you hear that?" The group went quiet, and then they heard it too. A faint sound, almost like whistling. Sound. Distant, airy whistle. It came from the trees, far enough away to be faint, but close enough to be clear. Just a few notes carried by the wind. "Probably another camper," someone said quickly, brushing it off. "Or a hunter." But deep down, they all knew. They hadn't seen another person since they hiked in that morning. The whistling stopped. They laughed nervously, tried to ignore it, and went back to their conversations. But the mood had shifted. Every crack of a branch, every rustle in the leaves made them tense. When they finally crawled into their tents, the forest was silent again. Too silent. Hours passed. The fire burned low. And then, the whistling came back. Closer this time. Sound. Louder, drawn-out whistle, fading into silence. One of the friends sat up in their sleeping bag, heart pounding. They swore they heard their name. Just a whisper, drifting in from the dark. "Come on. I must be imagining it," they thought. But the whisper came again. And this time they unzipped the tent. The others didn't even notice until hours later. When one of them stirred and saw the tent flap wide open, their friend gone. Panic set in. They grabbed flashlights, called their name, their voices shaking. The only answer was the echo of their own voices bouncing back through the trees. Finally, around dawn, they found them, sitting on the ground just beyond the campsite, pale, trembling, their clothes damp with morning dew. "What the hell happened? Where were you?" Their friend just shook their head, eyes wide, as if even speaking about it would make it real. They finally whispered, "It was calling me." The others froze. "What do you mean?" "I heard my name, over and over, coming from the trees. I thought it was one of you, but when I followed it, it kept moving, deeper, always just out of reach." They looked down at their hands, shaking. "It wasn't one of you. I don't know what it was, but it knew my name." No one spoke after that. They sat in silence until the sun rose higher, casting weak light through the trees. And that's when they saw it. Footprints. Not just a few, but dozens of them, surrounding the campsite, circling the tents. Some small, some larger. Some barefoot, others with shoes. All of them pressed into the dirt like whoever or whatever had made them had been walking around their camp all night. Watching. Waiting. The group packed their things in silence. None of them looked back as they hiked out of the forest. And none of them ever camped there again. It was supposed to be an easy babysitting job. Just 2 kids, a cozy house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and enough pay to cover the weekend. The teenager, let's call her Emily, had done this before. She knew the routine. The parents left just after 7 p.m., giving her quick instructions. The kids' bedtime was at 8. There were snacks in the fridge, and the house phone was right by the couch if she needed to reach them. Simple. The kids were sweet, went to bed without much fuss. By 8:30, the house was still. Emily settled onto the couch with her homework and the glow of the TV filling the living room. For a while, everything was fine. Then the phone rang. Sound. Old-fashioned phone ringing once, sharply. She jumped a little, then laughed at herself. Babysitting always made her a little jumpy. She picked up. Hello. Silence. Then a low sound. Breathing. Slow. Heavy. Hello? She repeated, voice shaky. And then, just before the line clicked dead, a whisper. Check the children. Emily froze, the dial tone buzzing in her ear. She hung up, telling herself it was probably a prank. Maybe some neighborhood kid messing around. But minutes later, the phone rang again. Hello? She said, louder this time. The same thing. Breathing. Whispering. The words. Check the children. Her heart hammered. She looked toward the hallway that led to the kids' room. The doors were closed. She had checked on them after bedtime. They were fine, weren't they? She told herself it wasn't real. Just a stupid prank call. But the calls kept coming. Every few minutes. Each one the same. Breathing. Whispering. Check the children. Emily locked the front door. Then the back. She closed the curtains, trying not to imagine someone out there watching her through the glass. Finally, she called the police. There's someone calling me, she whispered into the phone, her voice shaking. They keep telling me to check the kids. The dispatcher stayed calm, asked her to keep the line open, to stay on the phone with them until officers arrived. That's when she heard it. Sound. Faint creaking of floorboards overhead. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from upstairs. Her stomach dropped. The kids were asleep in their room downstairs. There shouldn't have been anyone up there. She pressed the phone tight against her ear. There's someone in the house, she whispered. Stay calm, the dispatcher said quickly. Don't hang up. Officers are on the way. Can you get the children and get outside? Emily's hands shook as she rushed to the kids' room. She woke them, whispering urgently for them to stay quiet. The children, still half asleep, clung to her as she guided them toward the front door. Every creak of the stairs above made her heart race faster. She swore she could hear breathing, moving closer, as if whoever was up there knew she was leaving. They made it out the front door just as the flashing lights of a police car pulled into the driveway. 2 officers rushed inside, weapons drawn. Emily stood outside on the lawn, holding the kids, every nerve in her body trembling. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the officers came back out, their faces pale. One of them spoke quietly. The calls? They were coming from inside the house. Emily's blood ran cold. The police explained that there was a second landline upstairs. Whoever had been calling her hadn't been outside at all. They had been inside the house the whole time, somewhere above her, whispering into the phone, watching. The children's parents never spoke about who it could have been, or how long that person had been there before Emily noticed. But one thing was clear. If she hadn't called the police when she did, that night could have ended very differently. Horror wears many faces, but it often hides in the ordinary. A midnight drive that should have been quiet and calm instead turned into a game of survival against someone lurking just beyond the headlights. A cheap apartment, meant to be a fresh start for a college student, revealed itself as a place where safety was an illusion, because someone else was already there. A night of laughter and camping beneath the stars reminded us that the woods don't always welcome company. And sometimes, what calls to you in the dark isn't meant to be followed. And a babysitting job, the kind teenagers have done for generations, transformed from a simple night of cartoons and snacks into the realization that danger was already breathing within the walls of the home. Each of these stories strips away the comfort we take for granted. The road isn't always open and free. It can be a trap. Our homes aren't always private. They can be watched, shared, invaded. The woods aren't always peaceful. They can hide the unseen. And even roles we trust, like babysitting, can turn from safe responsibility into nightmare within moments. What ties them together is the reminder that true horror doesn't need monsters, vampires, or ghosts. The most unsettling terror comes from people. From strangers who choose their prey carefully. From intruders who slip into the places we feel the safest. From voices that don't belong in the silence of the forest. From calls that shouldn't even be possible. It's not the supernatural that keeps us awake at night. It's the all-too-human. The fear lingers not because of what was seen, but because of what was real. The driver had a stalker behind them, not a phantom. The student's food wasn't disappearing because of rats. It was because someone was crawling through their walls. The camper didn't imagine the whistling or the footprints. They were signs of someone circling, watching, waiting. And the babysitter's nightmare wasn't just a scary phone call. It was proof that the threat was already inside. And that's the cruelest part of it all. These stories remind us that safety is fragile, that comfort can be broken in an instant, and that the ordinary can flip into nightmare without warning. So next time you go for a late drive, settle into your bed, head out into the woods, or leave your children with someone you trust. Just remember, nightmares don't always wait until you're asleep.